The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the desolate landscape. The wind howled through the gnarled trees, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. It was a night that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. A night when the veil between the living and the dead grew thin. In the heart of the haunted woods, there stood an old, decrepit mansion. It had once been a grand estate, but time and neglect had turned it into a crumbling relic of a bygone era. It was said that the mansion was cursed, that the spirits of those who had met their tragic ends within its walls still roamed its dark corridors. Few dared to approach the mansion, but on this fateful night, a group of friends had gathered for a dare. Among them was Alex, a young man with an insatiable curiosity and a fearlessness that sometimes bordered on recklessness. "Come on, Alex, don't chicken out now," taunted Olivia, the ringleader of the group. "You're always bragging about how fearless you are. Let's see if you can handle spending the night in the Alex's friends had been egging him on for weeks, daring him to spend a night in the mansion, and he had finally agreed. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest, and stepped forward. The mansion's front doors creaked open as if beckoning him inside. The interior was even more decrepit than the exterior. Dusty chandeliers hung from the ceiling, their crystals long since shattered. Faded wallpaper peeled away from the walls, revealing the rotting wood beneath. Alex's footsteps echoed through the empty halls as he explored the mansion, his friends following closely behind. "Wow, this place is a dump," Alex said, trying to sound brave, though his voice quivered slightly. "Quit stalling, Alex," Olivia said. "The real challenge is spending the night here, not just wandering around." Alex reluctantly made his way to the grand staircase, which spiraled upward into the darkness. At the top, he found himself in a long corridor lined with closed doors. Each door seemed to hold its own secrets, and the air was heavy with an oppressive silence. With a nervous laugh, Alex picked the door at the end of the corridor and turned the rusty knob. The door groaned open, revealing a small, dusty bedroom. A moth-eaten canopy bed dominated the room, and a faded portrait of a stern-looking man hung on the wall. Alex's flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the room. "This will be my room for the night," Alex declared, trying to sound confident. His friends exchanged nervous glances but said nothing as they each chose their own rooms. Alex lay down on the creaky bed, his heart still racing from the anticipation of the night ahead. He had always been a skeptic, never one to believe in ghosts or the supernatural. But as he lay in that dark, musty room, the stories he had heard about the mansion crept into his mind. As the hours passed, Alex struggled to fall asleep. Every creak, every whisper of the wind outside seemed magnified in the stillness of the mansion. Just as he was beginning to drift off, he heard it, a soft, mournful wail that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. His heart pounded in his chest as he sat up, his flashlight trembling in his trembling hand. What was that? He whispered to himself. The wailing grew louder, filling the room with an eerie, otherworldly sound. Alex's friends must have heard it too, because he could hear them calling out to each other in the hallway, their voices filled with fear. Alex's instinct was to run, to flee from the mansion and its haunting cries, but his pride held him back. He couldn't let his friends see him panic. With a deep breath, He swung open the bedroom door and stepped out into the corridor. The wailing seemed to be coming from further down the hall, and he followed the sound. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever, the doors to the other rooms disappearing into darkness. The wailing grew louder and more desperate with each step. Alex's flashlight flickered again, and he cursed himself for not bringing extra batteries. Finally, he reached the source of the sound, a door at the far end of the corridor. The door was old and weathered, and as Alex reached for the knob, it swung open on its own. The wailing was deafening now, and Alex stepped into the room. Inside, the room was unlike any other in the mansion. It was pristine, as if frozen in time. A grand four-poster bed dominated the room, and the walls were adorned with tapestries and paintings of a bygone era. But what caught Alex's attention was the figure at the center of the room. A woman, dressed in a flowing white gown, stood with her back to Alex. Her long, ebony hair cascaded down her back, and she seemed to be weeping. The wailing was coming from her, and Alex could see her shoulders shaking with each mournful cry. "Hello," Alex called out, his voice trembling. "Are you okay?" The woman didn't respond, and Alex took a cautious step closer. He reached out a hand to touch the woman's shoulder, but his hand passed right through her as if she were made of smoke. Alex stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. This couldn't be real. It had to be a trick, a prank by his friends. But as he turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening crash, trapping him inside the room. Panicked, Alex tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. He pounded on it, screamed for help, but his cries fell on deaf ears. The wailing grew louder, filling the room with a haunting, mournful sound. As Alex turned back to the woman, he realized that the figure was slowly turning to face him. The woman's face was pale and ghostly, her eyes empty sockets that seemed to pierce through Alex's very soul. She reached out a spectral hand toward Alex, and as her fingers brushed his cheek, a wave of icy coldness washed over him. Alex's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend what was happening. He had always been a skeptic, but there was no denying the supernatural presence before him. The woman's wailing had turned into a low, eerie chant, and Alex could feel himself being drawn toward her, as if by some unseen force. With each step he took, the room seemed to warp and change around him. The walls closed in, the tapestries twisted into grotesque shapes, and the paintings came to life, their figures contorting and writhing in agony. Alex's vision blurred, and he felt himself falling into a bottomless abyss. When he awoke, he was no longer in the mansion. Instead, he found himself in a desolate, mist-shrouded forest. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the gnarled trees. The wind howled through the branches, and the air was heavy with a sense of foreboding. As Alex looked round, he realized that he was not alone. The lost souls of those who had met their tragic ends in the mansion surrounded him. They were pale and ghostly, their eyes empty and haunted. They wailed and moaned, their voices blending together in a mournful chorus. Terror washed over Alex as he realized that he was one of them. He had become a lost soul, trapped in this eerie forest for all eternity. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. He tried to run, but his feet were rooted to the ground. The other lost souls reached out to him, their spectral hands passing through him like a chilling breeze. They seemed to be trying to tell him something, to warn him of some terrible fate that awaited him. But their words were lost in the howling wind. their pleas drowned out by the haunting wails of the forest. Days turned into nights, and nights into days, as Alex wandered through the endless forest. He was trapped in a never-ending nightmare, a prisoner of his own fear and curiosity. He longed for release, for a way to escape this hellish existence, but there was no escape. He was a lost soul, doomed to wander these haunted woods for all eternity. Back in the real world, Alex's friends had searched the mansion from top to bottom, but there was no sign of him. The mansion remained as decrepit as ever, its dark corridors holding their secrets close. The wailing had stopped, and an eerie stillness had settled over the place. The group eventually gave up their search and left the mansion, their hearts heavy with dread. They had lost their friend to the haunted mansion, and they knew that they would never see him again. And so, the mansion stood in the heart of the haunted woods, its cursed halls and ghostly inhabitants claiming yet another lost soul. The moon hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the desolate landscape, as the wails of the lost souls echoed through the night, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked within.